Welcome to this podcast from Baltic Methodist Theological Seminary. In this series, we explore student diploma thesis work in a conversational and accessible way, highlighting key ideas, questions, and insights from their research. In this episode, we explore the thesis of Mariia Shekhovtsova, titled Evangelizing Generation Z Youth in Russian-speaking Protestant Churches in Tallinn, Methods and Effectiveness. The work examines which methods Russian-speaking Protestant churches in Tallinn use to reach Generation Z and shows why personal relationships, mentoring, authenticity, and a safe environment are especially important for youth ministry. Let's dive into the main ideas and insights of the thesis.
If you want to catch the attention of a demographic that, practically lives inside TikTok, your very first instinct is probably just build a flashier app.
Right. Yeah, you think, we need to fight digital fire with digital fire.
Exactly. Tighter algorithms, more viral videos, slicker interfaces. But what if I told you the data shows that to reach the most digitally obsessed, anxious, and, uniquely isolated generation in human history, your best move might actually be to just throw your smartphone in the garbage?
I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive.
Really?
Because we treat connection like this engineering problem, right? Assuming the right software update will suddenly just fix human loneliness. But when you look at what this younger demographic actually craves, well, that entire tech-focused playbook completely falls apart.
It really does. So welcome to another deep dive. Today we are exploring this wild paradox with you. We're looking at how one of the oldest, most traditional institutions in the world, the church, is trying to connect with Generation Z.
Yeah, and to do this, we're pulling from a really fascinating 2026 theological thesis by Mariia Shekhovtsova.
Right. It's titled Evangelization of Generation Z in Russian-speaking Protestant Churches of Tallinn, Methods and Effectiveness.
It's a very specific slice of data, but the implications are huge.
Huge, because the ultimate irony we will explore with you today is exactly that technological disconnect. You might assume reaching Gen Z requires, fog machines and laser-focused digital marketing.
Yeah.
But the underlying research reveals a demographic that is quite literally starving for the exact opposite. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, to figure out how to reach anyone, you first have to understand the specific ecosystem that built them, right?
Makes sense.
We are talking about individuals born roughly between 1997 and 2012, and the research highlights this defining characteristic right out of the gate. This is the first truly unavoidably global generation.
Meaning they share a synchronized global youth culture.
Exactly.
Because the thesis cites a study noting that 99.3% of youth use the internet almost constantly every single day.
Which is just staggering.
I mean, let that sink in. That level of absolute connectivity means a teenager sitting in an apartment in Tallinn, Estonia, is absorbing the exact same global pop culture, participating in the same microtrends, and internalizing the exact same global anxieties as a teenager in Tokyo or Chicago.
The borders have just completely dissolved.
Right.
And we really have to look at the specific anxieties that dissolved those borders, because this is a generation whose entire baseline for reality was formed in the shadow of relentless compounding crises.
Oh, yeah. Like what specifically?
Well, they grew up with post-9/11 security threats as just a constant hum in the background. Then they watched their parents struggle through the 2008 financial crash.
Oh, right, of course.
And crucially, they spent their most formative teenage years, the years where you are supposed to be, learning how to socialize, date, and build independence, they spent those locked inside due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow. Which perfectly sets up the core worldview the researcher describes. The thesis notes that Gen Z is heavily shaped by two major philosophical forces.
Right, secular humanism and extreme individualism.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't spend their weekends reading sociology textbooks, secular humanism essentially means, moving away from the divine or the supernatural as your moral compass.
It places human logic and personal happiness at the absolute center of the universe instead.
Exactly. And combined with that extreme individualism, you get this philosophy of relativism.
The whole your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth concept.
Yes, which on the surface, to a teenager, that sounds incredibly freeing, right? Nobody can tell you what to do.
But in practice, the psychological toll is absolutely devastating.
How so?
Well, if there are no moral absolutes, if every truth is totally subjective, then there is no solid ground to stand on when a crisis hits. You are just drifting.
And that totally explains the heartbreaking through line in the data. They are fiercely independent, yet suffering deeply from clinical anxiety, a profound sense of isolation, and a desperate search for meaning, but without any map of where to find it.
Yeah, they're lost.
And on top of that global baseline, we have to add the very specific, localized pressure cooker that this researcher is examining, right? Russian-speaking youth in Estonia.
That cultural layer is so vital. These young people are navigating a highly secularized post-Soviet environment.
Right.
They are constantly managing what sociologists call a hybrid identity.
Meaning they don't fully belong in either world, right? Like they are speaking Russian at home, carrying the historical weight of their parents' or grandparents' roots.
Exactly.
But then they walk out the door into an Estonian society where they are desperately trying to assimilate. That creates a constant, exhausting internal tension of never feeling completely at home anywhere.
And when you feel like you don't belong in the physical world, where do you go?
The internet. You retreat to the digital world.
Precisely.
Which brings me to this analogy I just couldn't stop thinking about while reading these findings. For Gen Z, scrolling through social media feels essentially like drinking salt water when you were stranded in the ocean and dying of thirst.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You are entirely parched for genuine human connection. So you chug TikTok, Instagram, and Telegram. And in the moment, it mimics the sensation of hydration.
It feels like water going down.
Exactly. But biologically, salt water actively pulls moisture out of your cells. It leaves you vastly more dehydrated, damaged, and lonely than before you took that first sip.
What's fascinating here is how that saltwater metaphor is practically a clinical diagnosis in the psychological literature cited throughout the source material.
Really?
Yeah, the thesis refers to social media as a surrogate connection. It provides the visual illusion of a community, but the mechanism behind it actually amplifies the fear of missing out and just heightens social anxiety.
Because it's not real.
Right. And because they have been burned repeatedly by this superficial digital landscape, and because they've watched nearly every traditional institution fail during those global crises we mentioned, they have developed this incredibly thick armor of skepticism.
But underneath that heavy armor is a raw, almost desperate hunger for authentic in-person mentorship, right? And spaces where they can just be safe. Yes, exactly.
Which forces us to ask the million-dollar question for this deep dive. If Gen Z is inherently skeptical of traditional religious structures, but desperately hungry for genuine authenticity, how does the church actually bridge that massive divide?
The source material takes a really fascinating historical pivot to answer that.
Okay.
Rather than looking forward to some new technological innovation, it points back 2,000 years.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The argument is that the original first-century blueprints of Christianity were actually custom-built for this exact demographic profile.
Okay, that feels like a massive leap. How does an ancient text map onto a hyper-anxious, smartphone-addicted teenager?
Well, break down the actual communication methodologies described in the New Testament, specifically looking at Jesus.
Yeah.
First, you have the core concept of incarnation.
Meaning?
He didn't build a pristine, intimidating temple and demand that marginalized people come to him. He actively entered their physical, messy spaces.
Oh, I see. For a modern generation that feels isolated and distrusts institutions, the build it and they will come corporate model is just dead. Active physical pursuit is the only thing that registers.
That makes a lot of sense.
Second, consider how he spoke, almost entirely through parables.
Which, if you think about it, are essentially highly visual, character-driven narratives.
Right.
And Gen Z processes the world almost exclusively through visual storytelling and short-form narratives. A parable isn't a dry academic lecture. It's an immersive, somewhat open-ended story that forces the listener to wrestle with the conclusion on their own terms.
Yeah, but the brilliance is in the third method. While the stories were open-ended, the choices he offered were incredibly clear and demanding. He pushed people to a point of definitive decision.
Oh, wow. That directly counters the relativism we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
If a generation is swimming in murky waters where every truth is supposedly subjective and shifting, being offered a firm boundary like a hard yes or no is suddenly incredibly attractive. It offers the solid ground they've been denied.
Take that a step further and look at the Apostle Paul. The thesis specifically highlights his strategic shift in the book of Acts, chapter 17.
Okay, remind me what happens there.
So when Paul was speaking in a synagogue to an audience that grew up in the faith, he argued using their ancient scriptures because they shared that baseline worldview.
Makes sense.
But then he travels to Athens.
Right, and Athens was essentially The secular, highly intellectual, pluralistic hub of the ancient world, very much like modern-day Tallinn or, frankly, the internet itself.
Exactly the same energy.
Yeah.
And Paul completely scraps his synagogue playbook.
Really?
He doesn't quote scripture to people who don't believe in it. He walks around the city, observes their culture without immediate condemnation, and notices a pagan altar dedicated to an unknown god.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, he uses a piece of their own secular culture to build a conversational bridge.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this concept because it feels incredibly dangerous for any organization, religious or otherwise. Well, if you are constantly pivoting your message, changing the packaging to fit whatever a specific ever-shifting culture wants to hear, don't you inevitably lose the core truth of the message itself?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Doesn't the substance just get watered down until it becomes whatever is currently trending on TikTok? Like, how do you keep a 16-year-old engaged without compromising your own integrity?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the thesis addresses that exact tension through the critical concept of contextualization.
Explain that for me, because it sounds like a convenient buzzword.
Right, it does. But it's the intentional practice of changing the form of the communication without ever altering the essence of the message.
Okay.
Paul changed his opening hook in Athens. He used a local statue instead of a scroll, but he drove toward the exact same rigorous, demanding conclusion he would have in the synagogue.
So the core didn't change.
Right. The early church didn't survive by watering down its beliefs to be popular. It survived because it operated as a literal spiritual family. That intense high-commitment family structure offered the exact kind of life-on-life mentorship and paternal figures that Gen Z is currently lacking today. The medium of delivery adapted to the culture, but the rigorous, demanding community did not.
So that is the ancient theory. But theory is easy, right? It's an entirely different beast to see how this plays out on the actual streets of a major city today.
Very true.
To test these ancient blueprints, the researcher went into the trenches. She interviewed 4 youth leaders from major Russian-speaking Protestant churches in Tallinn.
Right. Truth in Jesus, New Beginning, New Testament Church, and the Estonian Methodist Church.
Yeah. She wanted to know, definitively, what works right now.
And, well, the tactics that fail spectacularly are just as illuminating as the ones that succeed.
Let's start with the failures, because both the church leaders and the sociological data were entirely united on this. Street evangelism is rated as the absolute least effective method for reaching Gen Z.
Which makes complete biological sense when you overlay it with the Gen Z profile we've built. Street evangelism is the definition of a cold contact.
Oh, absolutely.
A stranger walks up to you on the sidewalk with a flyer, initiates a sudden conversation about the afterlife, and there's zero pre-existing relationship and usually zero follow-up.
Think about the listener for a second. This is a generation that gets low-key panic attacks. Just having to make a phone call to order a pizza.
Yeah.
The idea that you can walk up to them on the street, interrupt their day, and expect a profound, life-altering conversation is almost comical.
They'd be terrified.
They have a highly tuned radar for inauthenticity in sales pitches. A cold contact feels entirely transactional, and transactional relationships are exactly what they're trying to escape.
So if transactional cold calls fail, what actually succeeds?
Right.
The leaders pointed heavily to 2 specific formats: the Alpha Course and home groups.
Now, the Alpha Course is fundamentally a discussion-based model, right? You gather, you share a physical meal together, you watch a short presentation, and then you simply talk about it. And home groups operate on a similar wavelength. Small, intimate gatherings, usually sitting in a circle in someone's living room. Why are these the winners?
Because of the mechanism of psychological safety. Sharing a meal biologically breaks down defensive barriers.
Oh, interesting.
These are distinctly low-pressure environments. They allow young people to walk in, sit on a couch, and ask incredibly hard, deeply skeptical questions without feeling like they are going to be judged or, forced to sign a membership card before they leave. It transforms a monologue into an open dialogue.
And some of these churches are pushing the envelope with really creative innovations to foster that dialogue.
They really are.
Like the Estonian Methodist Church runs an English club. On the surface, it has absolutely nothing to do with theology. It's just a space to practice a language. But underneath, it acts as a low-stakes community-building bridge.
That's brilliant.
And the New Testament church took it a step further and set up a dedicated Discord server.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a digital space where the youth just log in, play video games together, and casually discuss the massive anxieties of life and faith over headset audio. They aren't asking the youth to come to them. They are incarnating into the digital spaces the youth already occupy.
but despite those creative formats, the leaders are facing an incredibly steep uphill battle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When the researchers sat down and asked these leaders about their biggest daily struggles, they didn't complain about a lack of cool ideas or not having enough funding for better lighting.
No, not at all.
The leaders reported massive behavioral hurdles. The youth have very low discipline. They will enthusiastically promise to show up to an event, and they just ghost entirely.
Right, ghosting is a huge issue.
And they're battling sky-high digital distraction in the middle of conversations. But the absolute most glaring systemic problem across the board, there's a massive deficit of older mentors.
There simply aren't enough adults in these institutions willing to step up, put their own lives on hold, and do the messy, frustrating, time-consuming work of actually guiding these young people.
Yeah.
The leaders are essentially throwing their hands up and saying, well, we have built the right environments, we know the formats that work, but we severely lack the human capital to run them.
It's a profound structural crisis. And that brings us to the final and frankly most revealing chapter of this entire deep dive. We've unpacked the ancient theory. We've heard the adults complain about the struggles. But the researcher did something brilliant.
What did she do?
She bypassed the leaders and went directly to the source. She surveyed 31 Gen Z attendees across these specific Tallinn churches to see if the leaders' assumptions actually lined up with reality.
Oh, that's smart.
And the results completely shatter a few common myths about why young people engage with any institution today.
You really need to understand the demographics of this survey to appreciate the weight of the answers. Most of these respondents were in the older bracket of Gen Z, landing between 20 and 26 years old.
Okay.
Crucially, 67.7% of them have been attending their respective groups for over 3 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
These are not tourists who wandered in yesterday for a free slice of pizza. These are the core members who actively chose to stay.
And tracking how they arrived versus why they choose to stay is mind-blowing. When asked how they first walked through the doors, 61.3% said they came because of their family, and 25.8% came through personal invitations from friends.
So it's entirely relational.
Entirely. But when asked why they continue to give up their precious free time to stay, it has absolutely nothing to do with the entertainment value, the games, or the slick presentations.
What was it?
Almost half, 48.4%, stated definitively that they stay for spiritual growth and a relationship with God, followed closely by a feeling of belonging.
We have to unpack the age divide within this specific data point, because it is vital for anyone, whether a church leader or a corporate manager, trying to understand this demographic.
Go for it.
The survey revealed a massive shift in priorities that happens over just a few years. The younger end of the spectrum, the 16 to 20-year-olds, do place a high value on food, interactive games, and maintaining a very light, fun atmosphere.
Because they are still teenagers looking for a safe social outlet.
But the older crowd, the 20 to 26-year-olds.
The shift is dramatic. That older crowd specifically demands deep theology, sound teaching, and rigorous, serious intellectual discussions.
Wait, really? At that age?
Yeah, exactly. It's wild. But think about what happens between 16 and 22. You enter the workforce, you face the crushing anxieties of adulthood, you realize the world is incredibly complex.
They actively crave heavy, difficult content to help them navigate that complexity. They are completely and utterly over the superficial entertainment model. If you treat a 24-year-old like a child who just wants to be entertained with flashing lights, they will immediately walk out the door.
That is such a vital insight. So what about the barriers? What actually keeps them from showing up? If you listen to the conventional wisdom, you'd think the barriers would be a lack of friends in the group or finding the format too boring.
Right.
But the highest rated barrier by far, sweeping the board, was simply a lack of time. They are totally overwhelmed by the demands of university studying and early career work.
It's a logistical barrier, not a motivational one. They want to be there. They just physically cannot make the math of their schedules work.
Which brings us back full circle to the role of technology, because there is a massive statistical paradox here that I need you to help me reconcile. The data explicitly shows that 93.5% of these respondents use Telegram almost constantly. They practically live their entire lives online, and 77.4% of them get all their community event information exclusively through social media.
Right.
Yet when asked to rank the most important criteria for a good event, they overwhelmingly demanded an offline atmosphere of hospitality and sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
How on earth do we make sense of a demographic that is chronically online but actively demands offline sincerity?
This raises an important question about how society fundamentally misinterprets Gen Z's relationship with the digital world. We constantly confuse the medium with the message.
Okay, unpack that.
For Gen Z, social media is purely a utilitarian logistical tool. It's how they navigate the chaos of the world, how they find out where a meeting is, and how they coordinate their calendars. But it is not the destination.
Right, it's the map, not the territory.
Yeah.
You use the map to get to the mountain, but you don't confuse the piece of paper for the actual hike.
The actual draw, the underlying substance that keeps a 22-year-old sitting in a living room for 3 years, is the exact antithesis of their fast-paced, curated digital lives.
Wow.
They want slow, deep, authentic, face-to-face mentorship. They leverage lightning-fast digital tools to organize their chaotic lives specifically so they can access the slow, analog relationships they are desperately starving for.
So what does this all mean? When you pull all these complex threads together from this thesis in Tallinn, the ultimate takeaway is incredibly profound. Whether you are looking at a youth group in Eastern Europe, or you are managing a young team at a tech startup, or you are just trying to connect with your own teenagers at the dinner table, the answer isn't what we thought it was.
No, not at all.
It's never going to be about flashy events, fog machines, or trying to engineer a viral TikTok moment to win their fleeting loyalty. It is entirely about offering a genuine, safe, intellectually honest, and deeply committed spiritual family.
It requires a fundamental paradigm shift. We have to stop viewing them as consumers to be passively entertained with better media and start viewing them as isolated individuals in desperate need of genuine connection and rigorous truth.
And for you listening right now, I want you to apply this directly to your own life. Look at your workplace. Look at your community organizations or your own family structure. Are you relying on rigid programs and corporate efficiency to connect with the younger people in your life?
It's a hard question to ask yourself.
It is. Are you trying to engineer a clean, frictionless solution to reach them when what they actually require from you is the messy, highly personal, time-consuming work of authentic mentorship?
It is significantly easier and often cheaper to just buy a new software platform or launch a new digital marketing campaign than it is to sit down in a room and truly listen to someone's darkest doubts for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But the data proves that only one of those approaches actually works.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to chew on. We started this deep dive by talking about the modern instinct to build a better app, the assumption that we can fix a digital problem with an even better digital solution.
Right.
But if the most technologically saturated, interconnected generation in the history of human civilization is also the most crippled by loneliness, maybe the ultimate innovation we need for the future isn't a new platform or a faster algorithm at all.
No.
Maybe the most revolutionary, disruptive thing you can do today is simply relearn how to sit across a physical table, look someone squarely in the eye, and invite them to ask the absolute hardest questions they have.
Sometimes the oldest playbooks are the only ones that still work.
We will go, we will go, we will serve, we will serve, we will show the power of His
Thank you for
word.
listening. If you'd like to read the full thesis, please contact the library at Baltic Methodist Theological Seminary, www.emkts.ee. Have a blessed day.